Hey guys, me again, Orcslayer. What if where I last left off? Let's see. Checking. Where I last left off. Bell or Rame, Bell, Velstadt, and Vendrick led the final charge against the Giants' last stronghold over a long period of fighting. Bell and his forces, all of them were able to push through and finally destroy their last fort as they drove them off to the sea and sent them running away, while at the same time killing a giant lord. Now, Bell is decently old at this point. Let's say he's in his 20s. Like, early to mid 20s is how old he is. And at this point, now they're getting a chance at peace. As Vendrick has pretty much been... Everyone refers to him as King Vendrick at this point because he's pretty much gotten all the alliances of all the major cities and such, and all the towns that reside under him. And the kingdom is known as Drangleic. Bell and all of them are really happy. Bell is glad to be able to take a break from swinging his sword around, and now he can now he can be with the troops and preparing and defending the lands from bandits and any other kind of monster that would show itself. Bell actually is so happy that he actually invites his dad and the rest of his family to the celebratory feast. As when his parents show up, they are actually brought in as esteemed guests of General Rame. As Bell and his father's like, Rame. As Bell walks down, he's like, "Father, it's good to see you." "Bell, why are you called Rame?" "I used a different name." Bell sounded not right for this. As he's like, "Well, Rame, show us around. Show us this grand city." As Velstadt and his clergymen are all there singing, as he has pretty much a choir singing, as Velstadt stands there next to King Vendrick. Bell is actually walking around talking with some of his people. Usually it's Velstadt being the sociable one, while Rame is by Vendrick's side. Well, this time, Bell is the one going around being sociable. He's introducing his family to hot nobles, you could call it. As Vendrick actually gestures for him to come over, as Bell has to excuse himself from his family. As the three of them, Rame, Vendrick, Bell, Vendrick, and Velstadt all speak. Vendrick starts talking about plans of not expansion, but of rebuilding and getting all sorts of fields and such already up. As Bell talks about how his the Ravens and such, as he calls his troops, are all making their way, clearing out bandits and everything, and they are working together with his father's little mercenary group. Soon things should be clear enough for them to start actual efforts. But Bell actually advises for them to reinforce the area that was held by the Giants. The port town, as they call it, should be heavily reinforced with walls meant to be ready to be with walls and food stores ready for years worth of conflict. Because Bell has no doubt that the Giants may return one day, so he says it's better. It is good to be ready at their point that they invade, as that point is one of the only areas along that shoreline that you can really dock ships. As Vendrick listens to this, Velstadt actually agrees with Bell, saying that it would be a very good idea, and also they would be able to hold off the Giants for at least a time, so that way troops could be alerted, so that way they can summon a force together. Vendrick agrees and orders for it to be so. They need a person willing to command the said fort, and Bell actually recommends his father, saying that his father is an adventurer and is highly skilled. He'd be strong enough to help the troops, to train any troops, to repel any troops. And his father has been some time looking for a place to, well, not has been looking for a place, but they've been wanting a place, but never really could because of all the dangers. Vendrick thinks this over as he says, "Bring your father to me." He's like, "Yes, Lord," as he goes over and grabs his dad. As he gets pretty much informed on what they want, and Belle's father said, "So what would I be, huh? You're Lord of the Port?" He's like, "In a way, yes." He's like, "You do not have to accept this, but it would be highly, let's see the right word. No. Dang it. Highly appreciated." As Belle's father says, "You don't have to go formal with me, your lordship. I am just a mercenary and an adventurer. I'll do it. Me and my mercenary group can rebuild the town and get it all shaped up, but we would appreciate not just being a fort, but an actual city, if that would be okay. A city holds, well, it is a port town, and the lands and the areas, from what we could tell, are actually ripe with fish. So you could start a fish port or something like that, I guess." It's like, "Thank you, your lordship." He's like, "No need to thank me. Your son is the one who recommended you. He's one of my greatest generals. He is my greatest general." As Belle is really the only one who's considered his general, while Velstadt is considered the high priest. There's two different roles there, you see. Velstadt actually nods with this, saying he is right. As Vendrick dismisses Belle's father, they make way for it immediately as they begin rebuilding efforts. As we cut a long while in the future, to where Belle's in his late 20s. Belle is gonna be quite old in this story. Belle actually is speaking with Vendrick as they hear about a wandering seer as she comes to their city bringing bad omens. Well, not a seer more or less, but more or less a wandering seer, I guess is the best way to say it. She came to Lord Vendrick with tales of the future and what may come. As Vendrick has grown wise in this time, but he is also starting to look for a bride since, a king needs a queen. As they were looking through suitors, when the woman came in, Belle, actually, the first thing he noticed was how Vendrick's eyes lit up when he actually saw her. As even Belle could admit that her beauty was actually quite enchanting. But he felt something was off, but he couldn't tell what. So he didn't approach her or speak to her at all, actually. He actually became somewhat defensive about her. Well, Velstadt was busy focusing on, who she was and such, and hearing about how she has perceived visions of the future and Vendrick's greatness that would come. Vendrick is interested and actually asks her to give him more information. She goes on to tell him that Donyan, that she sees the future that can come to him, that he just needs to stretch his hand out and take it. That is all he must do. As Vendrick is listening to her, Belle leans over and says, "Is this wise, my lord? I know the gods bestow visions of future upon others, but never to such a degree. Do you believe this is wise? We do not know her, and I have never even heard of a seer getting something this detailed." Velstadt, "Do you question the gods, Belle?" He's like, "Yes, I question the gods. The gods did not give us our victory, but it was we, the soldiers, with our blood and steel, that we won the battles." As Vendrick says, "Enough from both of you. Come in and tell me more, Miss Nashandra. Shit. Yeah, it's Nashandra. Nashandra? Nash? I'll just be calling her Nash. Nat is like Nashanda. My name is Nashanda, my lord. He's like, well, Nashandra, welcome to my court. As Vendor becomes somewhat infatuated by her, listening to her visions of the future and the things that he will bring forward. Bell doesn't like where this is going. He can feel that Vendrick is actually closing himself off, even the short period of time, let's say 6 months. They've begun preparations to reinforce the fort, or the port. Fort of the port. The port of the fort. Whatever you wish to call it. They're reinforcing it as they speak, and that Bell was actually just about to set out to go see it. As Cyan is actually sent over, and at the orders of Vendrick, is actually preparing to mount a expedition, you could call it, of the Giant's Land, to see what will happen. As they do this, Bell continuously just stays there and watches from the shadows, you could call it, listening and hearing about the tales Nashanda is spinning for Vendrick. As Bell actually approaches Velstad of this, he says, I don't trust this Nashanda, this seer. She claims to be given visions by the gods, but this wouldn't be the first time in history such a person has done so. I believe we should watch her closely, Velstad. He's like, I have faith in Vendrick that he wouldn't be so fooled by her, and the gods would not allow such a plight be brought here. But how don't you know the old stories, Velstad? The gods allowed such things happen all the time. Maybe it's because Vendrick has grown unwise in this time. It's like, do you speak such words of blatant falsehood? He says, I'm saying it wouldn't be the first time a wise and noble lord fell low because he got arrogant, would be the word. It's like, I'll hear no more of this, Rame. Understood? It's like, don't... Understood? We are equals, Velstad. Don't use such terminology. When it comes to me, you are not my commanding leader. As Velstad, fine. Do you understand, brother? As though they did not get along, they had a rivalry like brothers would. They both shot pricks at each other and were actually pretty close. They both disagreed with each other's methods, but Velstad had charged into a few occasions the same Bell, and the same thing goes for Bell. They both risked their lives for one another, and that's a bond it's really hard to break between people. As Bell says, fine. It won't be my fault, though, when this kingdom comes to ruin because of Varric's inability to find the darkness that's in front of him. As Rain walks away with a few of his troops that are dressed in his pitch black armor following behind him, with Velstad's golden boys coming behind him as well. As they speak, Lord, Commander, are we sure this? You should be challenging Velstad straight to his face. He's like, me and him are the only ones who can convince him not to listen to her. But as long as neither of us are on the same page, I've voiced my opposition towards her quite aggressively. That has yet to do anything, aside from make Vendrick more cautious. I've noticed he's begun slipping from some of his duties to listen to her. That she, by Vendrick's wisdom, has been given a bit of control in some political matters. Doesn't matter. We're going to be sent over. As they get a messenger in the next court meeting, where it says that Cyan's body was returned over after they were sent to invade and they were slaughtered. The second wave of troops came by, and only a handful got out. From what they could tell, Cyan's body was displayed by the giants. Bell hears this, as if you guys remember, Bell knew Cyan and actually was pretty impressed by him, his skills and such as a warrior. Of course, he couldn't stand a chance against Bell or Velstadt, but he was pretty good. Bell is actually enraged by this and actually demands where's the troops that saw this. Says the troops that came in, one is missing an arm, one's missing a leg, and the other one is is bandaged up. These are some of the only ones that can walk. So as they make their way, they get their report. Vendrick rubs his chin saying, "You're right, Nashandra," as he orders that they are to make all haste to the giant's land and to burn it to the ground to stop this threat from ever coming. As they all say, "Yes, Lord Vendrick, for Drangleic." As Bell and his ravens set out with Velstadt's priesthood, they all march and eventually set sail. And they fight the giants. Another long war. They eventually make it through, though. Velstadt and them are... While Vendrick is staying there listening to Nashandra more and more about the tales, her counsel, as Bell knows that Vendrick locks himself away with her for long periods of time just to listen to her counsel. Bell doesn't like this. As he's thinking about one of these things in mid-battle, he's like, "This cannot be right. I will not allow this." As they're over in the giants' lands for years, as when Bell comes back, it's a very different place. He notices the skies are darker. There's a bad smell in the air. When he comes to the port city, Bell's father is like, they are all okay, but they actually tell Bell that after when you were there and Velstadt was eventually recalled by Lord Vendrick, as when everything started going awry, as Bell listens to it, he gets a full understanding of what happened. Because during mid-campaign, Velstadt was recalled by Vendrick, as there was beginning to have uprisings and unrest in the capitals and such, so the priesthood was called back to soothe things out, while Bell was left alone to command the entire invasion force, as they were having tough times and were getting bogged down by how many giants there were. Bell's forces took heavy damage. His ravens, especially, since they were the front line, since they were some of the toughest, they were sent as commanders and such, like how it was before. Bell eventually came to a halt when he slew another giant lord, one that was even stronger than the last, and Bell had to do it by himself this time. As the troops would describe it, it was like a battle between demigods. Well, not demigods, but a battle between actual monsters, because giants were considered somewhat human in some cases. This was one of them. As they note that the giant king, we'll call him the king, was a very skilled tactician, always being on par with Bell, who had difficulty even Vendrick had trouble at times beating in military games like chess and such, stuff like that. They were fighting with just with troops, but with logistics and everything. Eventually it came to a head when Bell was forced to confront him at the very last giant citadel, you could call it. As Bell's army was numerous, they were bloodied, battered, but eager to get this war over with. As Bel ordered his troops to make their move, they did. They began assaulting the city with catapults, trebuchets, ballistas, anything you can think of. As Bel led the backlines with commanders, as eventually there was breaches in the walls, and after the troops have had enough fighting, the Giant Lord appeared and started crushing them. Bel ordered all of his missile weapons, you could call it, to focus on the Giant Lord. But his armor and such that they had forged was tough. Tougher than anything that they really had ever seen a giant wear. Though the arrows, ballistas, and such were starting to hit his armor, well, he wasn't really dead yet. So Bel understood that it was up to him and his Raven Guard. Raven Guard. Another 40k thing. His ravens to march on. As they charged forward, ready to meet the Giant Lord, it took everything they had. Bel's ravens were all dead by the end of it. All 8,000 of them, well, not 8,000 of them, say through the war, Bel had 1,000 ravens left. And it took 1,000 of them plus Bel to kill the Giant Lord. As they all made their move, some of them knew spells and miracles and such, since a few of the ones that were in the clergy decided to, the priesthood decided to join Bel's side as they became inspired by his martial prowess and ability to see things that no one else was. As eventually, after another long, lengthy battle, Bel and them were slicing at his ankles, causing him to fall over. They did everything and eventually brought him down, with Bel striking him one final time in the head as he drove his sword through his skull. As they are done with this, and they all march home, not even trying to secure the land. They know the giants will retreat further and further. They burned towns, cities, anything. Destroyed monuments that the Titans had forged. They all return home and hear what Bel's father was telling him. Something is wrong with the capital. Everything seems to have gone awry. He doesn't like it, Bel. And he and his family are going to leave soon. This land is no longer safe. Bel says he knows. As he leaves with the troops all dispersing, going to their own separate ways. Some of them staying in the port, while others journey along with Bel as he makes his way back to the capital. As the further inland they go, Bel can tell that the world is growing sick somewhat. The skies are dark, trees are dead, and some animals are just vicious when they normally aren't. They arrive back, and as everyone's there, as they start letting off cheers. But it all stops abruptly when they all see the warriors that come through. As Bel left the capital with a lot of people in pitch black armor. As when Bel arrives, they were expecting a longer road, but then it just stops abruptly. As they look at the troops, they see their arms and armor, chipped weapons, broken armor, shields that are just bent all up. They see what they are. As Bel eventually arrives at the palace and sort of sees Vendrick with Nashonda as his queen, Bel hears this and just sort of stands up and walks away. As Bel's sitting down in the garden, you could call it, he's thinking to himself, he's like, Vendrick, you fucking fool. As he starts organizing things, he gets his troops ready, as within the year, the way everything just gets worse and worse. The downward spiral that the kingdom has taken is bad. There's famine, plagues. As Bell eventually gets up and walks into a court meeting where Nashandra and Velstadt Nashandra got her hooks in Velstadt and had him believing in her 100%. As she actually Bell was sort of removed from the council pretty much, or the court, where he was sort of isolated off from Vendrick. Bell ends up marching on in the palace with his 500 troops. As people start noticing this, they bring news to Vendrick, as Vendrick orders for Velstadt to get the priesthood, as Nashandra sits there in her chair next to Vendrick. As Bell opens the door with his troops right behind him, he says, "Vendrick, Rame, my general, why do you intrude on this?" He's like, "To put an end to the thing that's haunting this land." "What do you mean, haunting?" "You mean Nashandra. She saved us by giving us a warning by what the giants were gonna do." He's like, "So? Have you not seen outside? The land is dying. People, famine, plague. Sky grows darker every day. And you are too blind to see that, Vendrick. I would not know if she has cast magic upon you or what. But I know she must be removed. But I want you to know that you don't have to stand in my way. I do what is right by the city." As Velstadt approaches out of the corner, he's like, "And you disobey the king? The king does what is best for the country." He's like, "Is it the king deciding? Or is he just another puppet?" As he looks straight at Nashandra as he draws his sword. As the priesthood all sort of pile into the room, as Bell's warriors all get next to Bell, as they get their shields that have the same raven on it. They all are pretty much like a smaller version of Bell in some cases, with them having some similar swords, while others have spears, axes, some even have great swords. As they all stand there, Bell says, as Bell has had his helmet off at this point, as a tear rolls down his face, he's like, "Forgive me." As he puts on his helmet and charges forward. Velstadt leading the charge with his golden bolt. I'm just going to call them the Golden Boys. The Golden Boys, as they all lead a charge as they smash into one another. Bell's forces are outnumbered, but they're tougher. Bell and all of them start cutting through one another, as Bell fights Velstadt, with Velstadt using his giant hammer, I'll call it, and smashing it into his shield, with Bell cutting and trying to nick at Velstadt. Both of them wear heavy gold plate. Both of them wear pretty heavy armor. But Velstadt has miracles and strength on his side, while Rame has speed and agility, or what you could call agility, for a very tough, with a very, well, let's say, he's very nimble compared to Velstadt, we could call it. As they fight and fight. Bell knows that he may die today, but he at least dies doing what he believes in. As he disengages and actually kicks away Velstadt, as in this battle, his troops knew what Bell wanted. He wanted to get as close to Nashandra as he could. As they all push the battle in the right way, fighting as like one mind. As they all push forward, eventually Bell is just in enough reach to strike at Nashandra. As he pretty much kicks, punches, and stabs into Velstadt, sending him away as he lunges for her. But in that time, he goes to swing down his sword. Another one meets his as he's like, "Vendrick!" He's like, "Traitor." As he sort of parries off Bell's attack, as Bell is now fighting Velstadt and Vindrick, and he was doing barely enough to hold off Velstadt. As he fights against the two of them, he's quickly overwhelmed, and the rest of his soldiers are killed. As his shield is broken by Velstadt, and he's disarmed by Vendrick, they both hold him at his mercy as he falls over and is on his hands and knees. So he goes to stand up and falls to one knee. He's like, Vendrick, you are blind. I just wish the city doesn't have to suffer under her rule. As Vendrick puts away his sword, as he's like, Bell, no, Rame. For the crimes of treason, you are hereby banished from my kingdom. As Velstadt, shouldn't we execute this traitor? As Nashandra tries to say the same, but Vendrick puts his foot down. For all your service to my country, to this kingdom, I permit you to leave with your life, and nothing else. As the rest of Bell's troops at this point have been put down. As the last one falls, Bell says, I will return, and I will remove that malignant tumor that besieges you, Lord. Like, now leave. Bell grabs his sword and leaves, leaving his broken shield, saying, I will return. And that's where I'm going to be ending this one off at. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Hope you guys continue to enjoy this. Hope you guys have a nice day, nice night, nice life.